Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Sports Legends of the Carolinas. I'm your host, Scott Fowler, sports columnist for the Charlotte Observer, where I've worked since 1994. And as always in this podcast, I'm traveling across the Carolinas, seeking out some of my very favorite sports legends. This is the very first episode of Season 3 of Sports Legends, and we've got a real treat for you. We're in Level Cross, North Carolina, population 3,694, and I'm thrilled to be sitting across from NASCAR legend Richard Petty.
Petty is out in front at the line. Wants it to the inside. Petty wins it.
Known as the king of stock car racing, Richard Petty came from a racing family and then took the Petty name to new heights. He won 200 races at NASCAR's highest level, easily the most ever, as well as 7 NASCAR Cup season titles. He was one of the 5 members of the NASCAR Hall of Fame's very first class in 2010. Richard Petty is now 86 years old and still active in the sport and in life. When Richard Petty walks through a NASCAR garage, even now, with his trademark hat, sunglasses, cowboy boots, and oversized belt buckle, everyone notices because everyone still knows the king. This episode is brought to you by Charlotte Eye, Ear, Nose, and Throat Associates, a pillar in the Queen City for over 100 years. Experience race day like never before with quality hearing tests and customizable hearing aid options. We're so pleased to be here, and this is the first time for me in this museum and in Level Cross. So I wonder if you could just sort of explain how close it was. I know you were born right down the street.
Really, I was born in a house right beside the museum here. My brother and myself, and that's where we grew up for a few years. Then we moved over to the next road over where I live now in that area, and the house burnt down over there. We moved back over here, and then my dad built a little house, moved back over there for a while, and when my grandmother and granddaddy died, my daddy bought the home place where his wife, my mother, grew up. So we came back here, and when he started racing in 1949, and we just took a little reaper shed behind the house here, and that became Petty's garage. And so that's where all the race cars came out of in the early years.
Wow. And so everything you're talking about is really within like a square mile, it sounds like, or less than that.
Yeah, just a circle all the way around. Yeah, we still own the houses brought up in, and still own here at the original Petty Enterprise, which is now Petty's Garage. We do a lot of restoring old race cars, restoring all kinds of cars, whether T-models or whatever. Then we work on a lot of new cars here. People want more horsepower, they want bigger tires, bigger brakes, better suspension, and if they want special paint jobs, we got that. So we're still in business here.
What has kept you in Level Cross? You could have lived anywhere in the world.
You know, I never thought about going anywhere else. Like I said, I was born here, raised here, and this is home. And, all of our racing and stuff came out of this shop here. And so there was no reason need to go anywhere else, because when we started racing and stuff, my dad, and I worked on the race car, me and my brother and Dale Inman. And then when we got older, then I started driving. And so it was a 24-hour job. He didn't have time to go anywhere else. He had to live next door.
No commute. Yes, you didn't want that.
So he didn't have time to commute. But even after that, I just never thought about going anywhere else, because this is home. This is where we grew up, and this is where I want to be when my toes turn up.
Yeah, well, that you couldn't be anywhere else, right? This place is so associated with you. Tell me about your dad. He was a famous racer. Was that what inspired you to do it, or was it some other reason?
Really, my dad started in 1949. I ran the first race that NASCAR had as far as new cars. I think they started in 48, but they run modifieds and stuff. In 49, Bill France decided to start running new cars. And you got to figure this was right after World War II, and there wasn't that many new cars around, so it was really something different. And So they didn't start building cars till 1946 when the war was over. And but anyhow, my dad read in the paper that they was having a race at Charlotte, and I think they was paying $1,500 to win a thing. And he said, "Man, that looks like a good deal." So he borrows a car from some guys and decides to go racing. And very first race, he turns the car over, and about halfway through the race, something breaks. So we took a ride home with my uncle. And after that, they had, 7, 8 more races that year. And my dad looked at it and he said, "Look, this is something that I can do." And they pay pretty good. So he went out and bought a 49 Plymouth for $990. So he figured if he could win a race, he could pay for the race car.
Yeah, right.
And so basically, that's where it all started.
What sort of parent was he?
Well, he was a busy parent.
Yeah.
Him and my mother both were pretty stern people. Mm-hmm. They grew up during the Depression. Things was tough on them, so they didn't make it tough on us. They just didn't give us any breaks. But, we were required to, work around the house, work in the yard, work in the field if they had, something in the field. He grew tomatoes one year, he grew some pigs one year. I mean, he was just doing anything he could do to make a living. Then racing come along, and he said, "This is what we're going to do." But from that standpoint, he was very stern on that race car. He knew that you had to finish a race in order to win it or to win any money.
Yeah.
So, for the first few years, they called him Mr. Consistency because he wound up winning, not winning, he won a bunch of races, but finishing, like 90% of the races because he done preventive maintenance. And I think he was probably the first one that really looked at, hey, if we got trouble, let's fix it before we get to it. And, once we broke something, we never broke that piece again. And you got to figure these cars were strictly stock wheels, stock brakes, stock motors. So, as NASCAR grew, they started modifying things because things break. So they'd say, okay, you can do this to the car. Mm-hmm. And over a period of years, they turned into what they are today.
There's a famous story, wonder if it's true or if you could tell it to me about, I guess it was your first win and the protest and such. Can you go through that one with me?
Yeah, we was running a 150-mile race at Lakewood in Atlanta, Georgia. It was mile dirt. And we ran the race, and I was running a convertible 57 Oldsmobile, and he had a 59. I don't know where his Oldsmobile, I don't know what it was. Anyhow, so when the race was over, they flagged me the winner. And so, we stopped and jumped up and down. First time I'd ever thought about winning a race.
Really?
Because I just started.
How old were you? Like 21, 22, something like that?
Might have been 22 years old.
Yeah.
But I just started when I turned 21 in July of 58. Mm-hmm. And we were running convertibles, and my dad run the hardtop so that we didn't have to run in the same race for the same money.
Gotcha.
They had a race there, and they had convertibles and hardtops. And so, we was jumping up and down, thought we'd won the race. And then they come and said somebody protested. Looked around, there stood my dad. Somehow I know they had put me in an extra lap or left him out of lap. And at that time, being there wasn't a lot of new cars around, the organization had said, okay, if you've got a new model car, like a 59 car, you get extra $500. So the Petties went home with $500 extra. That's the way he explained it to me, anyway.
But it was all about the money. It wasn't about the win.
That was one thing about Daddy. He ran for the money. Glory, he couldn't eat that.
I mean, I would have been pretty PO'd at my dad at 22 if I just got my first win.
Second was the best I'd ever run. So
okay.
We was tickled to death with that.
So you were good. Yeah,
we was good.
Did y'all ride home in the same car and go home with all the money? Did you all go together and come back in the same car to Lakewood and everywhere, I guess, like this. Yeah.
Had the cars on the ground, but towed them behind a pickup truck or a car. So, everybody had the same thing, which was nothing. But everybody that participated at that time laid the groundwork for what it is today.
You have a very distinctive look. I mean, people know Richard Petty in a second. And so, where did the cowboy hats and the boots, the sunglasses, the belt? I mean, where did all this? Was this on purpose? How did you manage to do this?
It just really happened. I probably from time to time I've always wore sunglasses. My eyes are pretty sensitive to light, so I wore some kind of sunglasses most of the time. And I think 1950, 60, 70, 78, 79, Kyle Petty, my son, had a business called it Kyle Petty Boot Barn, sold boots, some Western area. And the Charlie One Horse guy came by one day, talked to him, and wanted to start selling hats because he wasn't selling hats. And so Kyle said, well, I don't know. He said, why don't I just give you one of these hats and you can wear it, or give it to your dad and let him wear it. Well, first time I seen it, I fell in love with him.
Really?
And so I started wearing the hat, and then we got with Charlie One Horse and cut a deal. I wear the hats for a while, and then I autograph them, and we give them away to people that auction them off for charity. So it works pretty good. Charlie One Horse gets their advertisement. We get to be feeling better because we've helped somebody somewhere down the line. And, I've always wore boots. If you look back in my early days and stuff, I didn't wear cowboy boots, but I wore boots. And then once Kyle got the boot barn, naturally, I got to wearing cowboy boots. So, all that stuff it didn't come along as me sitting down and said, this is what I want to portray. Yeah. It just all come on a little at a time. And then after a while, it got to be Richard Petty.
Today they would call that creating a brand, and there'd be a lot of marketing people trying to think it up. Right. You just came for you, like a little bit.
There's very few people in sports that's got their own brand.
Very few.
I mean, you know what I mean? They're there, they do their thing, but as far as just seeing a silhouette of them, something like that, you don't recognize them. And we didn't set out to do this; it just happened.
Yeah.
And so, over the years, it's been a plus for us.
Yeah, I mean yourself, Michael Jordan's silhouette when he's dunking the ball. There's a few others I can think of, but not many.
Very few.
Very few. Another thing you have that's very distinctive is your autograph, and you're famous for having signed so many, and also you have a very beautiful autograph that is readable. Now, where did that come from?
Well, when I got out of high school, I never thought about going to a 4-year college. But my dad said, he'd gone when he was growing up. He went to King's Business College and learned bookkeeping, how to write and stuff like that. So when I went, took a 6-month course at King's Business College, and so I took 3 months off one winter and went up there. And so you do your bookkeeping, you learn, how to handle money, how to put it down. But first thing they do is say, okay, you got to learn to write so that the next guy can read what you put down in the book. So I passed that course, and then they had penmanship. And I said, man, I like that stuff. So I got to be doing all the fancy stuff, and in doing that, then I learned not to write with my hand, but to write with my arm. So that's the reason all the circles and stuff. This was a modification of what I really learned.
And where was that? King's Business College?
Business College was in Greensboro. Okay. I went up there for three months, 1 year in the wintertime, and then took off, went racing, and then went back the next 3 months and finished the course.
Let's talk about some of your wins. 200 of them. We won't go through them all, but this will air shortly before the Daytona 500. First of all, before we get to the 79 Daytona 500, maybe the most famous race in NASCAR history, just tell me in general what's special about Daytona.
Well, really, until 1959, we had Darlington. And Darlington was our Super Bowl because it was 1.25 miles or something like that. And big asphalt track. So they had a big 500-mile race. So that was the crown and jewelry of that year.
Interesting.
And then Daytona come along, and it took them 3 or 4 years to really be the place for our biggest race. Darlington was always second then, but it took a while for that. And so we went to Daytona, and there's a big 2.5-mile track, bank 32 degrees, 33 something. You know, and you could run wide open all the way around the racetrack. Nobody had ever seen anything like that. And so we went down there in 59, and my dad was lucky enough to win the first race. And so, you know, after that, then we always pointed toward Daytona because it was the first big race that we had. Daytona was really the opening part of NASCAR, of the Cup Series. You know, there hadn't been any racing, you know, anywhere around.
Everyone's ready for it.
First thing you know, Daytona got to be the place to be in February from all over the world. People came from England, Japan, you know, Australia, you know, because it was the happening. And so it got to be a very prestigious deal. And if you win Daytona, you're a winner all year long.
Yeah.
In other words, they introduce you as the Daytona 500 champion, you know. So it's been a big, big deal in my career by being lucky enough to win 7 of them. And so that always started the year off good.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about 2 very special races in Daytona. The one you won in front of President Reagan, but before that, the 1979 Daytona 500, which I've only watched on TV, but it looked remarkable. Some people who are listening to this won't be familiar with this story, but tell us your story of the 79 Daytona.
Come down to the very last lap, and Cale and Donnie were the fastest cars. Myself, Darrell Waltrip, and A.J. Foyt was racing for third. I mean, we was having a heck of a race.
The white flag is out. 1 lap to go.
2 of the greatest fiddling here, fidgeting with first place, passing some of the strikers in the last lap, trying to take it home. It's all come down to this. Out of turn 2, Donnie Allison in first.
And going up the backstretch on the last lap, Donnie and Cale got together, and they crashed. Well, just as we come off of number 2, they crashed going in 3.
Where will Cale make his move? He comes to the inside. Donnie Allison throws the block. Cale hits him. He slides. Donnie Allison slides. They hit again. They drive in the turn. They're hitting the wall. They're head on the wall. 2 cars are out. In the backstretch are the leaders. Who is going to win it? Between A.J. Foyt and Richard Petty. Down the back straightaway come the leaders now.
Just as we came off number 2, blinker light come on. That meant caution. And at that time, you race back to the flag. And so, you know, we just sat there and we looked forward, didn't see nothing, looked in the mirror, didn't see no wreck until we got to going in the 3rd corner. And all of a sudden, there's number 1 and 2 car laying in the infield. And said, wow, instead of running for 3rd, we're racing for 1st.
Coming down, Richard Petty is now pulling out in front. Darrell Waltrip is in 2nd. A.J. Foyt is in 3rd. Here they come. Waltrip trying to slingshot. Petty is out in front at the line. Waltrip to the inside. Petty wins it.
I wound up beating Darrell by a car length, I think. And A.J. was right behind that. So instead of being 3rd, 4th, and 5th, we was 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. So that was they give us that one, you know.
Pit road, it has gone crazy. The Petty crew is out there jumping up and down. Petty has won it.
Richard Petty has won his 6th Daytona 500, and the crowd here are going absolutely mad.
And that was also the race where people don't remember that. So it was snowing on the East Coast. So a lot of people were watching the telecast that had never seen it before.
Well, you got to figure at that time, they just had ABC, NBC, and CBS. They didn't have all the satellite deals.
Right.
So anybody that was at home, it was snowing, so they couldn't go anywhere. So they was watching TV, and I guess the most exciting thing on TV was the race. So you had millions of people that had never seen a race. So it wound up being the perfect storm for TV, because this was the first time CBS or any TV had it live from flag to flag. So it was perfect for them. The race was perfect because there was excitement at the end of the
Right, yeah. Tell them what happened. Kel Yarborough and Donnie Allison.
Race,
what happened after that?
A wrestling match when the race was over.
Right.
So
a fight.
And there's a fight between Kel Yarborough and Donnie Allison. The tempers overflowing. They're angry. They know they have lost. And what a bitter defeat. They're leading them away.
Very upset. Very upset.
You got to see everything that the Cup Series produced. In other words, it was an interesting race that came down to the very last lap. And then you got to see the emotions of what these guys go through. So you got to see our whole soul in one day.
Yeah, really in about 15 minutes, right? The last little bit. Amazing. So now let's go to your 200th and final win, 1984. Yeah. Again, Daytona, not the Daytona 500 this time. 400. It was on a special day in America's history, though, right? July 4th.
July the 4th.
And tell us that story.
Well, July the 4th, 1984. The President of the United States was on his way.
And to heighten the drama, Air Force One is flying a special guest into town as the crowd and drivers at Daytona await the radio command from the nation's most visible racing fans.
All right, gentlemen, start your engines.
So he was flying, and he said, "Gentlemen, start your engines." So, we weren't paying no attention to the president. We was busy racing. And so, about 2/3 of the way of the race, I guess, or halfway, he landed, but we wasn't paying any attention. We was busy racing each other.
That's right. He said it on the radio or something, right?
Yeah,
okay.
I think they said something about it.
Right. He wasn't physically there.
And Kel and myself wound up, I guess we was probably a lap ahead of everybody else. And we was only 2 cars racing, and it was going to come down to the very last lap.
It is Richard Petty in car 43, Kel Yarborough in car 28. Now as they try to position themselves for the last lap first to the finish. When they cross the yellow line on the front straight here, there will be 3 laps remaining in the race. They're now on lap 150, and a car is spun out. Doug Heveron's car is spun out in turn 1.
And with a couple laps to go, somebody spun out in the number 1 corner. And me and Kel had just passed the start-finish line, and they threw the caution flag. So both of us realized this is our last lap. So, we raced. Kel passed me going up the backstretch, and we'd been loafing around. I've been trying to figure out, I know he's going to pass me, but, what can I do about it? Okay. And so over a period of maybe 8 or 10 laps, I'd started slowing the pace down a little bit. Just a little bit, enough that he really didn't notice it. Nobody else noticed it. So it wasn't really running wide open. So once I seen the caution flag come out, then I started running wide open. Well, Kel then started running wide open, and because he'd been back there feathering it out. And he called me, didn't catch me till the end of the backstretch, which if he'd caught me in the middle of the backstretch, I wouldn't have been able to overcome it. He called me just as he went in the corner. And he was probably running maybe 10 miles an hour faster than what he'd been the last 4 or 5 laps. And when he did, the car went a little bit high because he headed for the groove, but the sensation of the car carried him out. I was able then to cut down and get beside it. And so we come down the front stretch side by side. And the advantage I had, I was on the inside. And as we turned to go into the dog leg, at the start-finish line, we were side by side. But when I went in, I had to travel a little bit less distance than he did, and it was like 3 foot.
Here they are, Sam. They will come across the yellow line just about together, but Petty had the lead. By the nose of the car, Richard Petty was just in front of Kel Yarborough as they came across the line.
It was still 2 laps to go. And so, I said, we just won this race because they won't throw the green flag again. Well, come back around, and I stay on the racetrack. Cale's thinking it's his last lap. He goes down pit road, and then they holler at him on the radio. He pulls back out on the racetrack, but then Harry Gant, who had been running third, got ahead of it. So that race was that close, within 3 foot of the winner. But Harry Gant ran second. He wasn't even in the picture, and poor Cale ran third.
What was it like afterwards with President Reagan?
Well, it was pretty exciting. I'd met with the president before he became president, and then I'd been up there to do some stuff with him for a couple of times.
And now here in what for today has become the winner's circle, I am with the guest of honor, President Ronald Reagan, and the honored man of the day who has won his 200th Grand National Stock Car Race, Richard Petty. Mr. President, it's great to have you here. A member of your staff intimated to me yesterday that although you are interested in the fortunes of all race drivers, you might be excited to see this occasion, Richard Petty winning his 200th. It's quite a day, isn't it?
Well, it certainly is. I understand that no one in the whole history of racing has ever done that, or ever won 200 races.
You've been around this sport so long that you may not get terribly excited at the prospect of winning a race, but was there a little extra thrill in winning, knowing that the #1 fan was here today?
Well, definitely. 200 is very, very important, but under the circumstances, with all the presidents that's ever been in the United States, this is the first one that's ever showed up at a racetrack. So everybody's got to go from that, from racing standpoint, and I wanted to be the one that was able to welcome him to Grand National Racing.
I've been out campaigning for him because this was a campaign year. And, we went up in the box, and they had the TVs and all that. And so talked to him just a little bit there. Then when everything was over, they had blocked out the pit area, the garage area, and all the drivers and their crews and families and crews were able to sit down and eat Kentucky Fried Chicken with the President of the United States.
Wow.
And so, it worked out really, really good because he was running for president and I was running trying to win 200 races, and it all came together. And the big deal was when the race was over, we put him on the sports page. He put us on the front page. Yeah. So it couldn't have been a better opportunity to win a 200 race. I didn't win anything after that, but what else could you ask for?
Exactly, and I like you used a newspaper analogy there too, the sports page and the front page. I love that. We talked about some of your biggest wins and biggest joys in racing. What to you were some of your toughest moments or biggest regrets in racing?
I look back on all my racing, look back on life, period. And I've said this before. I wouldn't change anything. If I changed anything, growing up, in my racing career, in my personal life, it would change other people. Okay? Mm-hmm. I mean, you don't think about it. You're just thinking about yourself. Mm-hmm. But if I wasn't here, you wouldn't be here. Okay?
Right. The butterfly effect, ripple effect.
It's a ripple effect.
Right.
Okay. So you affect people directly and so indirectly, because if I change your life a little bit, you change somebody else's. So I guess the best thing is that I wouldn't change nothing. I take the good and the bad, and there's been a lot of bad I've done. Hopefully there's been some good I've done, and it kind of evens itself out.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure the death of Adam probably hit you very hard, though. Yeah.
When we had Adam come along, my dad came along, I came along. That's the reason we celebrated the 75th racing year of the Petties,
yes,
which started with my father. I came along, Kyle came along, Adam came along, and we here at Petty Enterprises was looking for Adam to carry on the Petty name and Petty Enterprise. He was going to be our front man,
sure, because
it done went through 3 others, mm-hmm, and so it was up to him. And then we lost him. He just turned 19, and we lost him. And the good Lord, I guess, didn't see our legacy carrying on any further than that.
Hello, everyone. I'm John Kernan. Welcome to RPM Tonight. We start tonight's show with some very sad news. 19-year-old Adam Petty died Friday from injuries suffered in a single-car crash at the New Hampshire International Speedway.
Even though I've got a grandson that's running, his name's not Petty, but he's still Hi Petty, okay? Yeah. And before that, Adam had worked with Sprint, telephone people, and they had a deal set up that Adam would go to these hospitals and children's wards, talk to them and stuff, and a lot of times he'd get on the internet and talk to people in other hospitals and stuff. So one day we was in Daytona, and Kyle and Adam rode over to a place called Boggy Creek, which was a hole-in-the-wall gang camp. And Adam looked around and said, you know, we ain't got nothing like this in North Carolina. Why can't we have something like this? So he comes back, he goes out and starts looking for land, starts looking around for different things. And so the idea came from him.
Really?
Then once we lost him, then we get together and said, you know, what can we do in his memory? So we said, okay, we'll start talk about doing a camp. And so we called the Hole-in-the-Wall Gang Camp, Paul Newman's crowd, and they came down and talked to us about it. And we said, you know, we want to do this, April or May or sometime. And said, we'll have a meeting in November and we'll bring it up to the board and see if they're interested in it. And I sat there and told them, I said, we're going to build this camp with or without you. You know what I mean? But we want to, you know, do that. But in the meantime, or over past years, Kyle and Paul got to know each other because both of them run some sporty car races together. So Paul knew Kyle. So the guy that came, that was running the operation, he called Paul and said, you know, I met with the Petties and all that. The next day, Paul called Kyle and said, do it.
No board meeting.
He didn't go to the board. Okay.
Yeah.
And so we started it, and the community got behind it. NASCAR got behind it. The drivers got behind it. Fans got behind it. Sponsors. So, you know, we just, we had about 600 acres of land over there. So we took a piece in the back part of the deal and give them, I don't know, 70, 80 acres. Since then, I think we give them probably a few more acres. They 110 acres or something that we donated to the camp. So we had a place to start it. And so we had a friend in Richmond, Hugh Hawthorne. He was in the construction business. So we called him and said, hey, this is what we want to do. So he comes down, looks around, talks about it, and he's retired. His son's running his business. So he gets 3 or 4 of his buddies that's retired. Here they come. They all come down here. And then he talks to a John Deere dealership in Richmond, and they volunteer to give us the equipment. So, man, first thing you know, they start digging and blowing up. And it just started with a hope and a promise. And then when everybody got behind it, then it worked out. And this year we're celebrating our 20th year. So, you know, everything worked out, all the volunteers, all the people that give money, you know, and so it's wound up that we've looked after 40 or 50,000 kids that wouldn't normally get to go to a camp. And Victory Junction is the name of the place.
On the track, these men are fierce competitors.
But today, they are helping build the Victory Junction Gang Camp for children with life-threatening illnesses.
Please join these and other dedicated drivers in support of this empowering camp being built in honor of Adam Petty.
You got kids that can't go to YMCA camp or, you know, church camp. We take care of them. We got a hospital there, and, you know, the kids come in, they check in, they bring all the medicines and stuff with them. And, you know, the hardest thing we do is it's a couple of hard things, is convince the parents that we'll take care of their kids, because some of them have never been out of the hospital or out of sight of their parent. And then, you know, once we convince them, and we get like 120, 25 kids at a time, and then the hardest part we have is getting rid of the kids once they get there. Because it's a
they want to
Disney
stay.
world,
Fantasy world, yeah.
And then the way we got it figured out, or the way they got it worked, each kid has one person to look after them. In other words, they're never alone. We got cabins. The people that look after them's on one side, the kids are on the other. So the kids are never by themselves. And if they need to take a shot at 3 o'clock and they're in the swimming pool, they don't go to the hospital. The nurse comes, takes care of it. So they don't really know there's a hospital there. So what's really good about it, we get feedback from the parents and stuff. The kids go home and they've done things they've never done. And then they want to do more. So it just opens up a whole new world to kids that have been segregated in a certain area. Sure. So, it's done so much good, and it helps the parents because they're more open to letting their kids do stuff. So, again, one person makes a lot of other people to make it work.
What a legacy for Adam and for the Petty family. And that is Victory Junction. If you haven't ever seen it on the website or something, check it out. It's a beautiful, I've donated there before, and you should too, really. It's a place where it's just helped thousands and thousands of people. Speaking of legacies then, and you mentioned laughingly a minute ago when your toes turn up, but as you are now 86, look much younger, but do you think about your own personal legacy and what do you want to be remembered for?
I hope the Petty legacy is Victory Junction. Okay? Yeah. But as far as my personal legacy, I just look at it. If people remember you, that's enough. Some people are going to remember me one way as maybe not a good person. Other people are going to remember me as a fair person. Some people are going to think I was great, you know what I mean? So the big deal is if you remembered good, bad, or indifferent, then that's all you can ask for.
Just being remembered at all, you're saying, yeah. Right. What were some of the racers, Richard, that you really enjoyed racing against and with?
Well, all the guys I grew up with, Pearson, Allison, Yarboroughs, Bakers, we grew up as a family unit. And you got to figure we didn't have sponsors, so we were able to be buddies off the track. And, now you got sponsors. These boys that drive the cars are so busy taking care of businesses and other things. We didn't have no business. We just raced. We was just racers. Yeah. And so all that stuff has changed, and everybody's environment's changed for 10 years ago or 20 or 40 years ago. So we're no different than anybody else.
Do you like racing today, and what are the big changes from when you were driving?
Racing today is so technical. Got all the computers. The first thing you know, we got more engineers looking in the computers than we got people working on the race car. And so that just went right past me because we were just used to making notes and saying, okay, this is what we done last time. What can we do to get better? All that stuff now comes through the computer. They try to, NASCAR gives us a rule, and then these guys sit there and try to sharpen that rule. They maybe don't go past cheating, but they go as far as they can within that rule. And then some of them cheat a little bit too. But,
well, that's always been the case, though, hasn't it? Isn't that part of it? Yeah.
But the cheating has really what changed racing. People cheat, make the racing better, and then NASCAR said, that ain't too bad, let's do that. So a lot of the rules and stuff are made just because people were pushing the rules that was already there.
How did you get the number 43?
The 43 came after 42. My dad's number was 42, and I think he took that off a license plate or something. Anyhow, he 42. I came along, I was 43. Kyle came along, he took 44. Adam's number was 45. And my grandson now's got number 46. So my brother raced with number 41, and Pete Hamilton won races for us in the number 40. So we've always just stuck in that.
I did not realize that. Huh. You seem like you're in great health now. How are you doing?
As far as I know.
Yeah.
If somebody don't tell me I'm feeling bad, I'm feeling okay.
What's your average week like these days? What do you keep yourself busy doing?
Busy answering questions with you. Yeah, we still go to the races. Yeah. Still keep up with what's going on, and it's never. I don't have a consistent day. Every day that I get up is a different day, and I think that's what gets me up. I've got no really routine about when you go to bed, when you get up, when you eat. You just go ahead and do it, and whatever's in front of you. You're always supposed to be here at 1 o'clock. You're 10 or 15 minutes early. We just get started early. So I go by schedule, somebody else's schedule, not mine.
You dabbled in politics for a while. How did you like that?
Well, I was county commissioner for 16 years here in Randolph County, and my wife was on the school board for 16 years, and I got a daughter that's been on the school board, I don't know, 6 to 8 years.
Really?
She's still on the school
so it's in the
board.
business. It's in the family too. Okay.
One time they talked me into running for attorney general. I'm glad I lost. Okay, But,
I thought it was Secretary of State. Was it Attorney General?
Some kind of.
Yeah.
Anyhow, that's how much. That's how much interested I was.
You didn't know what it was. Did you campaign a lot, or was it like
we campaigned.
You did the campaigning and all that?
Went to all 100 counties.
Really? Wow. Yeah.
One little county over there somewhere didn't even have a service station in it. There wasn't nobody to talk to.
You're just standing there looking for voters. Yeah, right. Just two more things. One is if you were to construct a Mount Rushmore of NASCAR people, but no Petties are in it, what four people would you put on that on Mount Rushmore for you?
Well, you'd have to put the Francis because they started all this stuff. Mm-hmm. Then you'd have to put, from the driver's standpoint, that would be tough. You'd have to put a David Pearson, but then you look at Bobby Allison, and I'm talking about the guys that done the hard work for the guys that's doing now. Mm-hmm. I'm not talking about the Jimmy Johnsons and the guys, Dale Earnhardt, the guys that came along later.
And the last thing I'll ask you is just you've always been known as someone who's been very accessible to fans. From the autographs to other things, I've seen you in action, and people they're not even sure you're a real person. Sometimes I think they come up and they're, like an icon, but they're like, oh, he was so nice. A lot of your fans are probably going to listen to this. So why have you done that for all these years? Why have fans been important to you, and sort of what message do you want to leave people?
When I first went to a race, Columbia in 1958, I think somebody asked for an autograph. That's great. Next race, maybe 2 or 3 people. Then the first thing you said, we had no sponsors. The only money we got came from the guy that was running the show, the promoter. But the promoter didn't have any money if it wasn't for the fans. So I said, okay, the fans pay the promoter, and then the promoter pays us. So the money comes from the fans, not the promoter. So every time I sign an autograph, I said, thank you for being a fan. You don't have to be a Richard Petty fan. You're a fan because you bought a ticket, and I'm going to take a penny or two home with me to feed my kids. Uh-huh. So basically that's the way it started. And so, and still that way, because if I've got a sponsor, then they have to buy that product for them to sponsor me or my race car. So it's still the same thing. You just got a different layer.
So many people don't realize that, but you did so early. Well, Richard Petty, this has been a wonderful pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you guys for coming back.
Thanks to Charlotte Eye, Ear, Nose, and Throat Associates for sponsoring this episode. Thanks so much for listening to Sports Legends of the Carolinas, a production of the Charlotte Observer. This show is produced by Lume Ali Sally, Jeff Seiner, and Cotta Stevens. The sports editor of the Charlotte Observer is Lydia Craver, and the executive editor is Raina Cash. Remember, you'll find much more about this interview and about all of our guests, including Steph Curry, Roy Williams, Dale Earnhardt Jr., and Don Staley, in our Sports Legends book. Order your copy now at sportslegendsbook.com. For lots more sports content and to continue supporting this kind of work, please visit charlotteobserver.com and consider a digital subscription. And connect with me on Twitter at Scott_Fowler or email at sfowler@charlotteobserver.com. See you next time.